that reminds me, Voodoo Fooers, I heard the other day that there was a right old Twitter storm there was from the people that inhabit Twitter, you know, the Twitterati people, where it sort of ran concurrently with this whole Paddington Bear having tea with the Queen and one thing and another nonsense, you know, along the same parallels of ridiculousness as that really. Yes, they come out and they said, oh, it's a bit bloody rich, isn't it? Really? Oh, they don't want no foreigners in their country, do they? They're sending them all to warmer climates in your Africa, to your Rwanda and places like that. Oh no, they don't want foreigners. But it's funny how the British people have got all foreigners as their royalty and have had foreign people in charge of them for bleeding centuries. I thought you gormlish bunch of bleeding twonks. It's embarrassing. Don't you ever listen to yourself and feel a bit bleeding, well, a bit of a prat really? To start with, all our royal family is descended, actually, from Mary Queen of Scots. It's very, very bleeding simple. You had your Mary Queen of Scots, her granny was Margaret, who was the sister of Henry VIII, and he was about as English as bleeding Port Scratchings, okay? So his sister, he sent her up to get married to your King of Scotland. And they, one thing and another, had a kid and everything. And one of those kids ended up marrying this woman. Well, he was the king. He'd become James the Summit of Scotland. And he married Mary of Guise, who was from France. There's a place in France called Guise somewhere. I don't know where it is. Anyway, his wife come from there. And they had a baby. And the baby was called Mary, Queen of Scots. Yes. And eventually she had a baby. And she called him James. And, well, just by luck and happenstance, he ended up being the king not only of Scotland, I think he was James VI of Scotland, and he was James I of England. So, well, he won the lottery really, didn't he, that one? And he had some children, he had a couple of boys and he had a girl. And then, obviously, his oldest boy was set to be king after him when he died. And he would have been whatever, I can't even think what his blood name was now. But anyway, he died swimming in the River Bleeding Thames, he did. Yeah, hey? Even in them days you could get in the River Thames and bleed and end up dying. It's like a bleeding pit of poison, that river it is. Yes, yeah. You're lucky to get away unscathed if you fall in there, Voodoo Fooers. So anyway, he was swimming in the River Thames and he ended up carking it, didn't he? Yes, he did. So that meant his brother, who was the next one down, he would have ended up being the Duke of York. But his brother got elevated up and he become like the heir apparent. And he become like Prince of Wales and everything. And then when his dad died, he become Charles I. And not to put too fine a point on that, Voodoo Fooers, Charles I ended up getting his bleeding head cut off. Basically, because he couldn't keep his bleeding mouth shut, and he just went around the place annoying everybody. And, well, I think the kingdom was just overrun with a load of bleeding lefties in them days. You know, the same mob, but like 400 years ago or whatever. So anyway, he had his head cut off. And obviously that didn't go very well, did it? And then eventually they got pissed off with having a little authoritarian tyrant, that Oliver Bleeding Cromwell bloke. Do you remember him? Nasty little piece of work he was. Yes, he was. So anyway, when he died, they asked his son, Charles I, his son, he'd run away to Bleeding France. He weren't stupid. They asked him back, and he became Charles II. But he didn't have no heirs. I mean, he had a load of bleeding children, but he didn't have any legitimate heirs. So they had to go to his brother, who was James, and he would have been like, well, he would have been James II, but he was Catholic and one thing and another. So they had to go to his daughter, so it went to Mary, and then when she cocked it with no issue, it went to her sister, Anne, who cocked it with no issue. And they thought, right, well, what can we do? And they gets out all their DNA charts, didn't they, and all the family tree and one thing and another, and they went all round it, and they had to discount all the Catholics hither and thither. And eventually they thought, oh, here we go, right back there to, we forgot, James I of England had a daughter, and she was married off to some bloke who lived in Bohemia, which is somewhere over there, I don't know, in the Belgium area. We don't talk about that. Anyway, so she went over there, she got married over there, and she was called, well, Elizabeth of Bohemia, and she had about 17 kids, and one of them was called Sophie. And when Sophie grew up, she married the Electorate of Hanover. Yes, she did. And she had a son called George. And when Queen Anne died, well, George was the nearest living relative that wasn't a Catholic to the throne. So actually, the whole bloody line came through the female line. And, well, George the First, you had George the Second. You would have had Frederick the First, but he died before he got a chance. So you had his son, who was, well, he became George the Third, didn't he? And then after George the Third, you had the Prince Regent, and then he was George the Fourth. Then you had his brother, you had William the Fourth. Then you had Queen Victoria, didn't you? She was around for bleeding years and years and years and years. Most of the bleeding century, she was, well, all of the century, bar about 18 years. She was alive over here and even if she wasn't being the heir apparent, she was being the queen, and then she was being the empress, one thing or another. And then you had her son, because she produced an heir, and you had, well, he was Edward the Seventh, wasn't he? And then you had his son, who was George the Fifth, and that's our Queen's granddad. And then you had, well, he would have had Edward the Eighth, but he ran off with an American. We don't talk about that. And so then we had George the Sixth, well, was the Queen's dad, and he was the Duke of York. And so that's how, and then obviously, because Edward the Eighth didn't produce any bleeding heirs, and the nearest heir was the oldest child of the Duke of York, who then became George the Sixth. And that's how we've got our Queen, Queen Elizabeth the Second, the greatest Queen the world has ever bleeding well known. And that's about it, really. It's just a bunch of twits, aren't they, on Twitter? Honestly, if they ain't moaning about something, and they always moan about it from a position of utter and entire ignorance, don't they? Thick as two short bleeding planks, the majority of people on Twitter. I don't even know how they can work a bleeding phone, to be honest. They're so ridiculous. Bleeding foreigners. We're all bloody foreigners. The royal family have been bleeding intermarrying across the globe for hundreds and hundreds of bleeding years, and they'll probably still carry on doing it for hundreds and hundreds of more years as well. So I thought I'd get on it. I thought I'd give them a little history lesson or something, put them on the right path. Might help them, mightn't it? They might actually, well, it might awaken one of their many latent brain cells, mightn't it, through 2 hours? Oh well, I've got to get on. Bye, bye, bye.